Hello, it's been a bit of time, but we're back working on Tails engine, and I decided to try and like revamp the asset like cache thing, basically turning it into a resource manager, completely disregarding the idea of an asset because it's meant to be super simple. The problem that we have is when we load a resource like a texture or a sound from disk, we have to call the specific path every time we do it, which isn't a huge problem really, but it would be nice to fix that, but it's not a priority at all. The other problem, which is a big main problem, is that every time we load something from a file, um, it, it loads a new version of that into memory. We don't have, if we have two like grass tiles, for example, we would need to load the grass tile one time in one entity, and then if another entity is wanting to use that grass tile texture, it'd have to load it separately, meaning we have two of the same texture in two different places in memory instead of just them both being combined into one place that we're referencing. And so that's the point of the resource manager, is literally just to be a central place for these things. So we don't need to care about, making it super complicated or fancy or anything. I went through a few different variations of it. The first one was having this asset data interface, which is what there is at the moment, but I think it's a bit too complicated and it's just not really needed. You can get by without doing this. I don't really want to create an inheritance tree when I don't need to, because it can get quite complicated and cumbersome, and so although it is fine and you can do all that stuff, the problem is with pretty much any of these implementations, you still need to create a specialized function for each specific asset or resource. Unless maybe you're using a category enum, where you can just say, create asset in this category kind of thing, instead of creating, thingies. And then maybe you could extend that with your own types if you use an in instead of a, explicit enum. I don't know. I don't really care. I don't need to extend it out much. It literally just needs to hold textures, sounds, fonts, and maybe like shaders or something, because it is meant to be super simple. So the design that I've kind of landed on is having a separate map for each resource. They could all be put in the same one, but then they'd all have to be boiled down to the same type. It could be a void pointer, it could be an std any, it could be a base class interface or something, but they'd all need to boil down to that one thing, and that complicates things, because then you've got to, if you're using a void pointer, you've got to manage that memory explicitly yourself. If you're using an any, you've got to work out what type it is and do stuff like that. If you're using a base class, you've got virtual functions going on and inheritance, whereas with this, you know exactly what the type is whenever it is, and it's all fun and games really. Yeah, so I basically just made some sort of like alias, a templated alias for the resource. So instead of using unique pointer, it's just a resource, and then you can kind of change this to be a structure later if we need to or whatever. Yes, this is all just like pseudocode basically. It's very C++ like pseudocode. I haven't actually implemented it. I don't know if it works properly, but that's what I'm going to be doing now basically. And I also have this JSON file which has red stuff in it because it's not like proper JSON, but basically we have this engine.json which will list the directories. So the textures directory will be res/textures or whatever you put in this JSON file. Now it doesn't really matter if this is specified in the JSON file or not, because if you're going to be getting a asset like via its path, then if you're doing its fully qualified path, then since it's compiled, this won't change anything. This has been called at runtime, and the path that you've put in is in the binary at compile time, so it doesn't really make sense. But when we create a texture and we put in the path, this path isn't the fully qualified path. It's the kind of textures path, which we specified here. Textures is this plus the file name. So this shouldn't be called path. It should more just be called the file name instead. But that's like technicalities we can get into in the actual implementation. Now the level JSON file, it'd have like level things like name is level 1 or whatever, and then it would have assets to load. Like if it has specific assets specific to this level that it needs to load, like for example a certain tile map or certain sounds for different things like ambient sounds and stuff, it would just be in here. And then you'd say the textures to load are world.png and the sounds to load are this, and it would say it basically take this and say, okay, it's the asset is a sound called ambient.ogg, so it takes the sound thing from this key and then adds the ambient.ogg onto it. So in a way, the assets, I should really be calling these resources, the resources that are loaded via the level, like automatically, their like ID in the map is their file name. But the resources that are loaded manually, like for example in a player class, when you want to load the player.png, you can call the ID whatever you want, so that it's more human readable, and you can like load it whenever and get it and stuff. So that's the kind of aim. And I also have notes here about the input manager that I also want to quickly implement. So let's get down to business. Yeah, I haven't worked on this in a bit, but that's because of like work and stuff. So yeah, I did do this. I made like a very simple like grid-based movement thing. Oh yeah, it doesn't actually let me play it because it's in a location which for some reason it doesn't know about. I don't know why, but this is it's just like kind of Pokemon style grid-based movement kind of thing. So what I want to do is not specifically in this. No, it is specifically in this function, in the get action scalar value function. Instead of getting the highest valued thing, we just add the values to it, basically. So that means we don't need this pointer, we just need a result, and we can just say result plus equals new result. So this result is going to be the one that we return at the end. So for each access key, we don't need to check if it's bigger or not. We just need to get the new result. So we can just add this. Get rid of this if statement. So for each access key, we just add the current scalar amount that is being pushed on by to the result, and then we return it. And that's our thing. So for example, if we're holding left and right at the same time, left would be -1, right would be 1. We add -1, which we add -1 to 0, which I think is just resulting in -1. And then because we're pressing right as well, that would be part of this or something, I think. We then also add 1, which would result in 0, meaning we have both of them pressed at the same time. We're not moving anywhere, meaning one doesn't favor the other because it's been added first in this. So yeah, I think it might not work because unless they're pressed, it's thingy, but get scalar amount checks if it's pressed or not anyway. Yeah, if it's pressed, it returns the scale multiplier, but if not, it just returns 0. So this should work. I don't know if I need to make a change in like one of these files for it to recompile or whatever, but what's this saying? Using namespace, oh okay. Whatever, I couldn't care less about that. Okay, so it's still favoring that for some reason. I don't know if it actually compiled those, so we could do some kind of debug print thing going on here and say include debug up here. Say print. Yeah, I also want to do a formatted print for this as well. That'd be quite cool. I don't know if I'm going to do it now, but I want to do some kind of formatted thing for it. We want to say scalar amount will just be result. Okay, so it does show up as 0, but for some reason it still like does stuff. Maybe it's the way I think it's just the way I'm handling the movement. Yeah, I think it's just the way I'm handling the movement with the, you know, if it's greater than 0, do this. If it's less than 0 or equal to 0, move left. That's why. So we can fix this by saying if else, or else if, not if else, what am I on about? If it's greater than 0, then do that, or something. Okay, so it's down to the way I'm doing the movement, but it does work. So this is fine. I can care less about this because this can just be rewritten. This isn't part of the engine, so it doesn't matter. So that's that. Now we don't need that pointer or whatever. That's all good. So now we can work on the crux of the issue, being the resource manager. Which means we don't need the stuff like font asset and things. We don't need this. We just don't need it. So I'm going to do a bit of a cleanup with the CMake project. Go in and include and get rid of the sound asset, the texture asset, and the font asset. Rename the... Do I need asset data? No, I don't. This is the interface. We don't need asset data either. We just need the resource manager. And this we can change to whatever we need to. So it's going to be a bunch of errors, but that's fine. So now in CMake, we just need to get rid of the asset stuff. Have these 3 asset things. We have the asset data, and this will be called the resource manager instead. Back into the source. We get rid of the asset, the font asset, the asset. Yeah, the interface doesn't have a CPP file because it's an interface. Then the asset cache will just be resource manager.cpp, and this will get rid of these assets, change this to resource manager. Okay, so now we have this. We can probably just build it in here actually. What was that undo rename? Was that, wait, no, go back. I clicked undo rename by accident. Asset cache resource manager, there we go. Yeah, I click undo rename by accident. Open a terminal, do a CMake. Also, SFML, its first SFML 3's first release candidate was released like today or yesterday, which is quite cool. So font asset doesn't exist anymore. Lots of things are going to break because of include stuff. This seems to not be realizing what's happening. Change this and say resource manager. You know, I could just rename in here. Okay, we don't need any of this. Okay, we will include things as we need them. I don't know why it can't find the CPP file. I can deal with that in a bit. So, what we need is we need memory for the thing. We can also just make this bit public. We can say it needs to be templated. Say using resource is going to be a unique pointer to just T. So now our resource is our thing. We can go into private now. And we also need a map. And we also need string as well. Make the unordered map have the string be the key and the resource be the value. And here we can say, you know, textures. We also need to forward declare stuff like texture and sound buffer and a font. So now we can say SF texture, and that should be fine because it's a unique pointer. So we can just copy this, call it sounds, make it sound buffer, and then make it fonts. There we go. So now we have these things. We just need to make templated functions for them, the implementation things, basically. So if I put this over on my left screen, we don't need them to be public, they can be private. So the first one will be creating the resource. I want everything to be known as resource instead of asset, because asset implies it's got a bunch of other stuff in it. Resource is just the actual data itself. So create resource, we want to have the string as an ID. We then also want to have the full path as well as we should probably do this as a using as well. This should also be templated, I think. Call it resource map. It's going to be an unordered map of string and resource of T. So now we can just say resource map with that. Although we might want to, it's all good. So now here we can say resource map of T, and everything should be chill. Cool, this looks good. Everything's, you know, nice and simple. We can say you know, resource map or something, or data map, doesn't really matter. So here we can say, you know, if I'm going to call it data map. I just feel like it makes more sense. So if the data map here contains the ID, then we can return the the value in it. And of course it knows that it's a unique pointer, so we can use this and be completely fine. So now we have, however, yeah, if it's not indexed, it's not returned, then we want it in place, which has what? This. I don't actually know how in placing in a map works. Is try and place, I think, which has the key in the, yeah. So we can try and place the ID and a make unique from the T, which we want to input the path in as the constructor, because, and then we can obviously return. Actually, we could do this. Because we're returning this in both of them, we can just invert this and move this up to here. So only if it doesn't do it, we can add it and then we return it, and it's a lot simpler. So yeah, because texture, sound buffer and font all have constructors which take in the file name or the path or whatever, it means that, you know, everything's quite cool. It takes in a file system path, which is interesting. I assume this can be gone to and from string, but I might have to look at the docs for that. Anyway, we create our thing, we load it and stuff. We can then make another, completely misspelled that. We can then make another function called getAsset, which just takes in the ID and then the resource map. And I should probably have it as reference, or const reference. Const reference probably is fine. No, because I'm trying to emplace it, it should just be reference, yeah. This could be const reference though, because we're only getting, which meaning this could be const. This can't be const though, can it? I don't even know. I don't really know what I'm doing. So if the data map doesn't contain the ID, then we can just return null pointer. However, if it does, then we can return the data map, like value at the ID. Don't know what this is complaining about. Can be made static? Yes, it can, but it's not going to be. So that's cool and all. Yeah, because they just take in the map that they're gonna like alter, so they could just be static, I suppose. I don't want to make them public static though, so anyway, now we can obviously just make the resource specific functions. So we can say, you know, for the texture, we can say gets or create texture. We can give it a string for the ID. Also a string for the path. Well, actually, let's call it file name. And this will be implemented in, well, just down here, because for some reason I can't find the CPP file. So let's see what's up with that. In the CMake lists, we have resource manager.cpp, and we also have resource manager.cpp. If I change this to resource manager, get rid of these, get rid of all of this, would that work? I don't know. But how would it find a hard time? How would I have a hard time finding it? Oh wait, the current cache is different. What are you on about? If you're not sure, re-edit the cache. So the source CMake list does not match. What? Okay, I suppose I've got to get rid of the cache. Wait for it to do its thing or something. And it says something about fetch content with something. The current CMake hash directory is different than a directory that. What? Where's it created? So it's trying to fetch content. CMake set for SFL failed. Fails to populate it or something. Does this work? I mean, this works. So I don't really know what's going on there. I just kind of like deleted the entire contents of the build folder. Okay, so I think it was just because they found an older version and something weird was happening. It seems to be working fine now, so that's all I really care about. Just gotta wait for this to finish, and then there you go. So it seems to be working fine. Go into here, hopefully the resource manager source file is available. Yay, we have it. So now we can say implement it. Yes, brilliant. We can implement it. Right, so in here we just want to wrap. We can just say return or create resource. And this will be the ID. We can then have the directories, get directory to textures. Should probably put this as a string. And we want to add the file name to it. And then obviously this takes in 3 arguments. Third argument being the resource map, which will be mTextures. Brilliant. So now we'll create a resource, add it to the textures thing, and also return this, which is pretty brilliant. So that's different. So now we can say SF texture, get texture, just get it via the ID here. And here, just do the same thing, except here we can just say get resource. Or whatever. Oh, I called it get asset. It's supposed to be called get resource. Here we go. Get the resource at the ID and the textures map. This is saying it can be made const. Yes, indeed it can, and it probably should. It should probably return a constant texture as well. I don't actually know if it should or not. I can look at the SFL documentation and find out really, but now let's go into sound buffer. This will just be the same thing really, create sound. Okay, we can also set these to be no discard, because they're constant and shouldn't be discarded when you get them or something. Might as well set this to no discard as well. Okay, here we go. So that's quite good, because the only thing we're including, yeah, we aren't including, you know, these classes in the header, because we're passing them into here just as whatever, so that's cool. We should probably include them. Do we even need to include them in here? Yeah, I think we do, because we're doing it as a thing, so I think we need to include the graphics, texture, include audio, sound buffer, and then include graphics font. Yeah, so I mean, maybe a better implementation would be using an enum, but at the moment, I couldn't really care less. So, yay, nice. So we have this resource manager now. This is going to completely break a lot of stuff which I have like set up, which references the asset cache. And it's also not meant to be a singleton, right? It's meant to be, you know, in each level and stuff. So the level needs to be changed a little bit to have a resource manager object. And because it only includes this, which is fine, because, you know, the level includes some of them anyway, so, you know, we can just add it in here. I think we could just put it down here, yeah. Put it as a resource manager. Does it even need to be private? Do I need to, like, have a getter for it? Or can I just have it as a public variable, a public member? I don't think it needs to be private, I'm going to be honest. We can have it be public. Just say, you know, resource manager. Resource manager. Nice. Now this is saying, because it's default, move constructors should be marked no accepts. It's not because it's default, it should just be called no accept anyway. And then by extension, this should be no accept as well, I think. Cool. Obviously this is now going to be worried about moving and copying. Actually, no, copying is fine. I can just delete the copy constructor, actually. It's going to be a const reference, isn't it? So this is the default, set the set the move to default. Set the move assignment to default as well. And then set the destructor to default. Because the only members it has are unique pointers, or maps with unique pointers. They don't have copy constructors and they don't have copy assignment operators. They only have moves and default stuff. So if we just essentially define it as if it's a unique pointer itself, it should just work. So that should be all good. And because levels can't be copied either, it should just work just fine. So that's all chill. Yeah, so then obviously the entity, if they wanted to do whatever, that's another thing. I wanted the entity to have a like load resources function, like before it spawns. And it will have a resource manager reference in it. This will be a place to load all the resources that this entity requires / depends on. Here you go, and this we can just forward declare. We don't need the texture asset. Yeah, we need to do stuff like this. This could just be a pointer. to an SF texture. And it can just be a pointer to an SF texture as well. The implementation of these things, we need to also change it's incomplete, obviously. Yeah, whatever, get rid of them. Include texture here, that is fine. And then if it's invalid, yeah, that's just the same as what it was before, that's all good. And then this same thing, which is all fine really, yeah, just return that. Yeah, we don't need the .get, we can just set it. Then obviously the asset cache thing, when we deserialize, instead we can say set texture to be get level dot resource manager dot create texture. No, we could just get texture, I think. Yeah, we can create texture and say, you know, the object at texture dot get as a string, and then the path being something. I don't actually know what what that would be. Something like that, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so our texture is just a raw pointer because the actual resource manager is managing it, because it's unique pointers. So I think this is fine. It probably won't compile. There's probably some other things I forgot. And also it's got to recompile SFML as well because I got a new version from master. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. Audio manager is having trouble. That's fine. We don't need this. That as well. Widget text is having trouble because there is no font asset. That's fine. That's true, actually. I did want to fix the text. I think I changed a little bit. Yeah, I changed a little bit of how it was working and stuff. Yeah, the font is just going to be an SF font raw pointer, which will be just fine. Like so. And then we need to obviously include the font header. So this will then be just a raw pointer to the thing, and then we can say SF font again, raw pointer. This will just be a raw pointer. I'm going to deal with a lot of raw pointers because most of the systems in the engine are handled with unique pointers and stuff. And then everything else just seems to work just fine. Texture, that one's a pointer, this one is returning a reference though, so that's why you do a reference thing here, that's all good. I might change how the sizing and stuff works, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know if this will work or not. I need to have another look through this and see how it actually works and stuff. But anyway, what other errors were there? Microsoft things, that's just warnings. Audio manager again, resource manager, binary, this no operator found, which takes the left hand operand of something. Interesting. Widget text again with the thing. Use of undefined type sound buffer. Interesting. Interesting. Deleting incomplete type in level. Why is it deleting it in level? Why is it deleting a sound buffer in level? You know what, I'm going to put this as implement it in here and just make it default still, but make it in the source file. I think I need to do this as well, but I'm going to. Just so that the pair is here. And then rebuild it or recompile or whatever. So, okay, the undefined thing is fine because obviously the destructor is here, which includes this. However, it's saying no operator found, which takes a left hand of type, unordered map, basic string, unique pointer to font, and then a bunch of other stuff. There is no acceptable conversion. Okay. Get resource, font, we have string, and an unordered map. Oh, I think it might be because I'm doing const. Because it's const. I'm pretty sure I have to use @. And this is const. Yeah, because I don't think the square brackets in a map is actually constant. Can I? I don't think I can actually look at that. If I go to this, and then the operator, that, yeah, no, it's not constant. But if you go to @, this is constant here. Yeah, it's got a constant version, and I'm pretty sure it just does the same thing as the square brackets. I don't know exactly though, but this should fix it. I think it's just a matter of it being constant, non-constant stuff. Yeah. Nice. So we have a thing. It seems to be working just fine. If I go to our player and I try to do a thing, we don't need to include the resource manager because it's all well and good. The player, well, actually in the level I want to do something as well where this is calling spawn entity implementation. Before I do init spawn, well, actually in init spawn does that, but before that, or I don't like this init spawn being a thing, so let's get rid of it. I don't want it. But what it did was set the outer to this and then spawn it. But before I do entity spawn, I don't actually want to do that. Instead, well, actually no, I could do that just fine. But before that, I want to do entity load resources with the resource manager going in there, like that first. Yeah, and that should be just fine. So when we spawn an entity with the templated thing, it calls back to that. If we spawn an entity with this, it calls back to that. those are the only two spawn entity things, so that's fine. So they both call back to the spawn entity implementation, which is good. Very good things. And then, yeah, so now that that's actually going to be called, what I do want is a separate kind of initialization process where when the entity is being created automatically, when loading the level, you have, you know, a loop going through creating all of the entities, setting their outers and stuff, and then after that loop is done, you loop through them again, loading their resources and spawning them, and then the next frame you do the post spawn or something, right? So the spawn method is called after, like, all of their outers and stuff, all of their load resources have been done, stuff like that. So it's got, you know, a very structured way of doing it. At the moment, it's just when this entity is spawned, load its resources and call its spawn method, meaning in this spawn method, an entity which you might want to reference could not exist, or it might not exist. So, you know, I don't know. Anyway, we can now, in this player, override load resources, and in here we can say resource manager dot we want to create a texture, it's including the resource manager, even though, oh wait, no, it's because we haven't included a level, that's why. So we want to create a texture, and ID and file name. The ID can be player, file name can just be player.png. I don't actually know if the engine is is filling the directories. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, directories. We load directories from the JSON, meaning we need to find an actual JSON file for it to do that. But we create a texture here. We also want to just set texture from it, like that. So if we compile it now, it should compile just fine, but it might crash because SFML throws an exception in the constructor of texture. Yeah, so it's saying abort has been called because failed to load image, provided path, the absolute path, is trying to find it like in here, because obviously it's adding the directory thing, which is nothing, so it's just trying to find it, you know, in the immediate directory, and it's unable to load it, so we can ignore it if we want, but it'll abort or whatever, which probably isn't what I want, but not doing that and using the function would have to make me do another way, because the font is open from file, the function, whereas with sound buffer and texture it's load from file, so I can't even use a templated thing because they have different function names for it, which is really annoying, but it doesn't really matter, I suppose. So yeah, so let's give us, well, I could just make the thing. I have man.png still. Let's use this guy. Let's go into here, but just call it player.png. And now we have a player here. The text is loaded correctly. So obviously the resource manager is working. And if we then create a engine.json file, and we go over and we give it a directories thing here, and we say textures will be res/text, for example. We save it, we then say res and then text, and we pop our player in there. Then we run it, it fails to find it because it's still looking in there instead of the thing. So when we create texture, we want to get the directory, add the file name to it. That being said, what actually is the thing? We can say textures directory is this. So does it failed to load directories? Okay, that's why. It's also for some reason not printing the thing. Anyway, it's fine. So what is the engine actually wanting here? It's just saying, okay, it's DIRs, not directories. Let's call it directories and go with that. So that should work. No. Still just trying to find that. So it failed to load directories apparently. Again, in our main we have engine. Our engine has a default constructor which provides null pointer engine settings. If it's null, we create new engine settings. The default for these engine settings, obviously we have registries, but we also have this setup file path which returns engine.json, which is this. That's our default, is engine.json. So when we do stuff, we want get setup file path, which is engine.json, which you can see loading engine.json. Obviously it fails to load everything because it doesn't actually contain it, and it doesn't even seem to be finding it. It says that JSON is valid objects, but if I change it to like something else, okay, so it failed to find it. So it is finding it correctly. It just fails to load directories, which is interesting. Copy that, paste it into here. Okay. So how is it failing to find that then? It's literally the first thing. And then in directories it checks if it's null. That's fine. Loading the looping directories. It gets the key and value, it places it with the key and the value and stuff. How is it missing this? How to load directories using default. But how is this coming out as false? If I do this and just did setup JSON at directories. Wait. Okay. So it's just because I didn't change the main thing, which meant it didn't trigger a full recompile of this. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, yeah, it works. It works, obviously. I want to change stuff on this because I want to, debug print this and say something like added directory, added, the key yeah, added like, textures directory as, the value dot get string, right, like that. And then after this we can do a debug and just print an empty thing. Obviously we need to change the main file for it to do a recompile of that. Actually no, it does do a recompile of that. It's just compiling it to a library. Changing the main file here means that the actual application has to recompile, meaning it brings in the newest version of the thing, of the library. So we loop, we say added textures directory as red/text, and it works. So we know that the directory thing works. It works with the JSON, and we can change where the location of the player sprite is, where we give it a relative path, just say player.png, and it just finds it in the textures directory, which is brilliant. That's exactly what I want. And now anything else can just say, get texture, this, for example. And that is brilliant. I think I'm going to end it here because it's obviously past 3 in the morning. But it's good. I don't need to look anything up. And it just kind of works. So, yeah. That's quite cool. I'm chuffed. So yeah, have fun, I suppose.